There is a strange stillness that comes before a leap, not the kind of stillness that means nothing is happening, but the kind that feels heavy with possibility. You may have noticed it in your own life. The goals that once kept you awake at night no longer have the same pull. The conversations you used to treasure begin to feel hollow. And even the very desires that once felt like a compass now seem to lose their direction. It can feel unsettling, almost like life itself has taken its hands off the wheel. But what if this is not stagnation? What if it is the opposite? In the language of consciousness, this is the moment the field begins to rearrange itself. In the language of the body, it is your nervous system learning to carry a new vibration, one that belongs not to the past you've known, but to the future that has already been written into your potential. Think of it as a sacred invitation, an invitation to step out of the momentum of habit, to loosen the grip of who you thought you had to be, and to allow the deeper current of who you truly are to rise. It is not a punishment. It is not a pause. It is preparation. Imagine a seed in the dark soil. From the outside, nothing seems to happen. Yet inside, the shell is cracking. Roots are beginning to take shape, and life is quietly preparing to burst into form. That is what this stillness is. You are that seed. The silence you feel is not emptiness, but the richest ground for rebirth. I know how the mind reacts in times like these. It whispers that you are lost, that you've made a mistake, that progress should look like constant motion. But progress is not always movement. Sometimes, progress is the willingness to be still long enough for the old scaffolding to fall away. The beliefs that once defined you, the identities that once kept you safe, they are dissolving. And though the dissolving feels like loss, it is actually space being made for something your rational mind cannot yet imagine. This is why the nervous system feels stretched, why your emotions feel heightened. You are being rewired. Neuroscience tells us that the brain needs these pockets of quiet to create new pathways, to anchor new ways of being. It is like a river finding a fresh course. At first, the water resists, pressing against old banks, but eventually, it carves out a new channel, and what seemed like struggle becomes flow. And here is where the invitation deepens. Can you allow yourself to rest in this sacred pause without rushing to fill it? Can you breathe into the uncertainty without trying to fix it? For just beyond the discomfort lies the coherence of a new timeline, already alive, already waiting for you. Think of the orchestra before the music begins. The hall falls silent. Every instrument is poised, every musician alert. That silence is not wasted time. It is the very foundation upon which beauty is born. Or picture the archer drawing back the bowstring. To an untrained eye, it looks like hesitation, but to the one holding the bow, that tension is power gathering, preparing to launch the arrow further than sheer effort could ever take it. That is where you are now, drawn back, but not to be restrained, only to be released into a trajectory more expansive than you've ever known. In quantum terms, this is the space of superposition, where multiple realities exist side by side. You are standing at the threshold of infinite timelines. The stillness is not absence, it is choice. Every thought, every breath, every small act of surrender is collapsing the possibilities into the one that matches your resonance. And here's the quiet miracle: you are already entangled with that future. The version of you who has already made the leap is sending signals backward through time, feeding you glimpses, hunches, and flashes of clarity that feel like they come from nowhere. So when you feel a sudden knowing, when a thought drops in fully formed, when a chance encounter leaves you, stirred in ways you can't explain, that is not coincidence. That is your future self, whispering through the veil, reminding you that you are closer than you think. I know this space can feel like exile. The old world no longer fits, and the new one has not fully appeared. But this is not exile. This is gestation. And just as a child is formed in the hidden dark of the womb, so too is your next chapter forming now in the quiet unseen. The greatest mistake is to panic in the pause, to scramble for distractions, to run back to what is dissolving simply because it feels familiar. Familiarity is not safety when your soul has outgrown it. Familiarity is the comfort of the cage. The true safety lies in trusting that what is leaving is making way for what is aligned. So I say to you, treat this silence as sacred. Let it soften you. Let it strip away the armor you no longer need. Breathe into it as if it were holy air. Because it is. Every exhale is clearing old frequencies. Every inhale is attuning you to the coherence of a new timeline. One day soon, you will wake up and realize that the leap has already happened, and it will not arrive with trumpets or fireworks. It will arrive with the quiet recognition that the anxiety has lifted, the confusion has faded, and you are simply standing in the middle of a new reality, one that feels so natural, you may wonder why you ever doubted it. That is the grace of the quantum field. It does not need drama to prove its power. It needs only your alignment. So if you are here now, in this strange in-between, take heart. This is not the end of the road. This is the doorway. And the key is not effort, not striving, not control. The key is awareness. The key is surrender. The key is choosing, in each moment, to live as if you already belong in the reality that is calling you. Because you do. 1. Emotional oscillation, the trace of two realities. There are days when your emotions seem to rise like a tide, carrying you upward with certainty, and then just as quickly, they fall away, leaving you in the valley of doubt. It can feel like being on a boat caught between two currents, one pulling you forward, one tugging you back. And in those moments, you may be tempted to believe you are failing, that you are unstable, that perhaps something is wrong with you. But what if I told you that this is not failure at all? What if this emotional oscillation is the most honest evidence that you are standing between two realities in the language of the quantum? This space is called superposition. When two possibilities exist at once, both alive, both potential, you are not broken because you flicker between joy and fear. You are not weak because you swing from certainty to confusion. You are simply oscillating between the frequency of who you were and the frequency of who you are becoming. Like an airplane rising to a higher altitude, turbulence is not a sign that the plane is falling. It is a sign that the air currents are shifting. The shaking is proof of ascent. The nervous system, too, has its own story to tell. Neuroscience reminds us that the brain is always predicting that S, always trying to stabilize you by drawing from old maps. When your consciousness calls you into a new state of being, the nervous system doesn't know the terrain yet, so it swings, testing the old path, then glimpsing the new one, back and forth, until a fresh rhythm begins to hold. Your emotions are the language of this rewiring. They are not enemies to be silenced, but messages to be honored. So when the wave of anxiety rises, place your hand on your heart. Feel its steady beat beneath the storm. Breathe slowly, as if you are whispering to your own nervous system. You are safe, even here. Then when joy swells unexpectedly, when the future feels possible and light rushes in, receive it fully. Do not cling to it. Do not make it proof of progress. Simply let it wash through you. Each emotion, whether sharp or sweet, is data, not a verdict, not a final judgment, just data. I have lived through this enough to know the pain comes not from the oscillation itself, but from the story we attach to it. We say, if I were truly growing, I wouldn't feel this fear. Or, if I were really aligned, I wouldn't still doubt. But that is like saying turbulence means the flight is doomed. The truth is gentler. The truth is that you are learning to fly at a higher altitude. The oscillation is the recalibration. Let yourself be the storm and the calm center within it. Imagine yourself as the eye of the hurricane, still, grounded, present. While the winds of fear and hope circle around you, you do not need to banish the winds. You only need to remember that you are more than the weather. You are the sky in which it happens. Some days, it will feel as if you are living in two worlds at once. In the morning, you may taste the old reality, heavy with habits and doubts. By evening, you may glimpse the new one, alive with possibility. This is not regression, this is integration. It is the soul weaving together the strands of past and future until they collapse into the single thread of the present. So be gentle with yourself when you sway. Do not demand that your emotions hold a straight line. Healing and transformation have never been linear. They are waves, spirals, rhythms. Just as the ocean does not apologize for its tides, you do not need to apologize for your fluctuations. They are the mark of movement. They are the living evidence that you are not stuck. You are in transition. When the next wave comes, place your hand on your chest again. Say softly, "This is not me failing. This is me shifting." Call the emotion by its name. Fear, hope, grief, anticipation. And then, as you would watch a bird fly across the horizon, let it pass. You do not need to cage it. You do not need to chase it. Simply let it come. Let it go. One day soon, the oscillation will quiet. The swing between doubt and certainty will soften into a steady hum, and you will find yourself waking into a new stability. Not because the emotions disappeared, but because your being has learned to hold them without being undone. That steadiness, that grounded coherence, is the signature of someone who has crossed the threshold. Until then, trust the waves. They are carrying you forward. Every crest, every dip is part of the rhythm of becoming. You are not lost between two realities. You are the bridge that is weaving them into one. 2. The subtle language of the universe synchronicities as breadcrumbs. There are moments in life when something simple catches your attention. A song comes on the radio with words that seem to echo exactly what your heart is whispering. Or you overhear a stranger's conversation that feels like it was meant for you. Or you keep noticing the same numbers showing up again and again. At first glance, these things might look like coincidences, small and random. But if you've been walking this path long enough, you begin to realize the universe has its own way of speaking. And it rarely shouts, it whispers. These whispers are not there to entertain you. They are not tricks of chance. They are breadcrumbs scattered across your path. Gentle reminders from the future version of yourself, guiding you toward the timeline you have already chosen. That self, the one who has already crossed into the new frequency, cannot step back and drag you forward. But it can leave signals. It can send you little flashes, nudges, moments of recognition that say, keep going. You are on the right trail. When I look back on some of the hardest seasons of my life, I realized that I was never without guidance. Even when I felt most alone, there were always signs. Sometimes they were as quiet as a particular phrase, showing up in different places in the same week. Sometimes they were as undeniable as meeting the right person at exactly the right time. And while my mind often dismissed them as meaningless, my heart always knew these were not accidents. These were coordinates. The key is not to become obsessed with chasing signs. That, too, is just another form of control. Another way the mind tries to force certainty. The true invitation is to notice them with openness, to let them land gently, and then to ask, what part of me is this? Speaking to what belief is being challenged? What possibility is being affirmed? You see, synchronicities are not about the external event itself. They are about your internal readiness. The universe uses what is available: numbers, songs, conversations, even billboards on the side of the road, to get your attention. The content of the message is less important than the awareness it awakens in you. When you feel that spark of recognition, that subtle lift in your chest, that is the signal. That is your consciousness saying, "Pay attention. This moment is aligned." I often compare it to the way birds migrate. They do not carry a map, and yet they always know where to go. They follow magnetic fields that are invisible to the eye. In the same way, you have an inner compass that is constantly attuned to the frequency of your becoming. Synchronicities are like the landmarks along the way. They reassure you that even though the landscape looks unfamiliar, you are heading in the right direction. And here is the deeper truth. These signs are not something outside of you. They are reflections of the field you are broadcasting. They are the mirror of your resonance. When you are aligned with a new frequency, the world rearranges itself to echo that alignment back to you. That's why you begin to see patterns that confirm what you've been silently calling in. It isn't magic. It is coherence. But this is where gentleness is needed. If you demand a sign every day, if you cling to them as proof that you are safe, you begin to block the flow. The universe doesn't operate on bargaining. It operates on trust. Signs are not there to replace your faith. They are there to strengthen it. They are not the foundation. You are. So, when a sign comes, smile at it. Receive it the way you would receive a letter from an old friend. A quiet reminder that you are remembered, that you are loved, that you are guided. Ask yourself, what simple action today will anchor me more fully in the frequency I've chosen? Sometimes the action is as small as taking a breath before reacting, as humble as speaking kindly to yourself, as quiet as choosing gratitude in the middle of doubt. These are not dramatic moves, but they are powerful because they align you with the version of you that the signs are pointing toward. Over time, you will find that the signs become less necessary, not because the universe has stopped speaking, but because you have learned to listen in a different way. You no longer need the external echo to feel secure. You begin to live with an inner assurance that tells you, moment by moment, that you are exactly where you need to be. And yet, the signs will still appear, sometimes playful, sometimes profound, just to remind you of the bond between your present self and your future self, between you and the field that holds all possibilities. So if you've been seeing repeating numbers, or hearing that same phrase from multiple people, or feeling as though life is trying to get your attention, don't dismiss it. Let it soften you. Let it remind you that you are not navigating this path blindly. The version of you that already lives in your chosen reality is leaving markers along the trail, small points of light that reassure you in the darker stretches of the journey. The subtle language of the universe does not need to be decoded like a puzzle. It only needs to be received with an open heart. Every synchronicity is an invitation to trust, to release, to align a little more deeply with the reality you are stepping into. So the next time a song plays at the perfect moment, pause, close your eyes, breathe it in, whisper to yourself, I am listening, I am willing, I am ready. Because in that moment, you are not just receiving a sign, you are receiving yourself. 3. Frequency misalignment. When the old pieces no longer fit, there comes a time in every journey of transformation when what once felt alive begins to feel strangely hollow. The job that used to ignite your passion now feels like a heavy coat you no longer want to wear. Conversations with people you once held close begin to feel forced, as though the words are moving, but the music is gone. You sit across the table from someone familiar, yet the silence between you feels louder than the dialogue. And here's the truth. No one has done anything wrong. There is no villain in this story. What you are experiencing is frequency misalignment. The pieces of your life are not broken. They just no longer fit together. This can be one of the most painful parts of growth, because the mind will tell you something is wrong. It will try to convince you that if you just work harder, if you just push more, the old puzzle will lock back into place. But deep down, you know that isn't true. What has shifted is not them, and not even the circumstances. It is you. Your energy is vibrating at a different frequency, and what once matched no longer resonates. I often imagine it like standing with each foot on two boats that are slowly drifting apart. At first, it feels manageable. You think you can balance, stretch yourself wide, keep a little of both worlds. But the distance grows and the body begins to strain. Eventually, you will have to choose, not because the boats hate you, but because your integrity cannot be split forever. The courage to pull one foot back and stand fully on the vessel that matches your true rhythm, that is what protects your wholeness. This moment, though, can stir up grief. You might feel guilt for outgrowing a relationship, shame for losing interest in a path that once defined you, or fear that stepping away means betraying what you've built. But let me offer you another way of seeing it. When an instrument goes out of tune, it is not a failure of the music. It is simply an invitation to retune. Life is always asking us to retune. You are not abandoning people or experiences. You are honoring the truth that energy is dynamic, not static. The resonance you once shared was real and beautiful, but it has served its purpose. Just as you cannot squeeze into clothes from a younger age without discomfort, you cannot fit back into frequencies that your soul has already expanded beyond. This is not easy, especially for those of us who have been taught to equate loyalty with staying the same. But true loyalty is not about sameness. It is about honesty. And honesty sometimes means admitting, I love you, but we no longer move to the same rhythm. Or this work has been meaningful, but it no longer nourishes me. Saying these words does not erase the past. It simply allows the future to unfold without distortion. I've lived through this myself, and I know how tempting it is to cling to the old bliss. There is a comfort in familiarity, even when it no longer feeds the soul. But holding on to what no longer resonates drains you. It is like trying to run modern software on outdated hardware. No matter how much effort you put in, the system will crash. Not because you are broken, but because the upgrade has already happened, and the old foundation cannot sustain it. So, what do you do when you realize the pieces no longer fit? First, breathe. Don't rush to cut ties or burn bridges in panic. Simply acknowledge what is true. This does not resonate anymore. That simple recognition is powerful. It releases you from the illusion that you can force yourself back into harmony where harmony no longer exists. Next, practice compassion for yourself and for the people or situations you are outgrowing. Remember, they are not wrong. You are not wrong. You are simply on different frequencies now. Think of it as two radio stations. Both are playing music, but you cannot listen to both clearly at the same time. Your dial has shifted. Finally, give yourself permission to step fully onto the boat that is calling you. It takes courage to lift your foot off the old vessel, because it means surrendering the illusion of stability. But the moment you do, you feel a new steadiness rise within you. A steadiness that comes not from clinging to the familiar, but from standing firmly in resonance with your truth. You will know you've made the right choice when peace replaces strain. The conversations you do have will feel alive again, because they're with people tuned to your current station. The work you pour yourself into will feel aligned, not forced. And instead of bending yourself to fit the old puzzle, you will find that a new picture is forming, one that reflects the wholeness of who you are now. So if you find yourself staring at the pieces of your life and realizing they no longer lock into place, don't panic. Don't shame yourself. Don't blame others. Recognize it for what it is, a frequency misalignment, and see it as an invitation to choose the boat that carries you forward, to choose resonance over resistance, to choose integrity over comfort, because the truth is, you can't live fully divided between two worlds, and you don't need to. The courage to let go of what no longer fits is the doorway into the life that does. 4. Silent transformation dawn, without fireworks. Real transformation almost never arrives with trumpets. It does not crash into your life like a parade with lights and noise. More often, it slips in quietly. Like the first light of dawn, you wake one morning, and without realizing it, something that used to weigh on you simply doesn't matter anymore. The problem that once kept you awake at night feels strangely irrelevant. The triggers that used to spark anger or fear no longer hold power, and the mind, which has been trained to expect drama, leans in with suspicion and says, "Is that it? Could change really be this subtle?" Yes, it can, and most often, it is, because when your frequency shifts, the miraculous becomes ordinary. What once felt like a breakthrough becomes simply the way you live. The extraordinary becomes your new normal. And this is perhaps the most challenging part for the mind to grasp, that transformation is not always an explosion. Sometimes, it is a quiet settling, an ease that replaces effort, a peace so natural you almost overlook it. I remember a season in my own life when I longed for some grand sign that everything had changed. I wanted the heavens to part, for the shift to be undeniable. But what actually happened was this. I noticed that the same conversation that would have pierced me with pain a year earlier left me untouched. The same fear that once paralyzed me no longer stirred in my body. It wasn't dramatic. It was simple. It was steady. It was quiet. It's like healing from a long illness. There isn't always a single moment when you can say, "Now I am well." Instead, you notice small differences. The breath comes easier. The body feels stronger. You wake up with more lightness. By the time you recognize the healing, it has already been happening for weeks, even months. Transformation works in the same way. By the time your mind realizes it, your soul has already crossed the threshold. The quiet arrival is often overlooked because we have been conditioned to chase the spectacular. We think that if something is important, it must be accompanied by intensity, by drama, by fireworks. But the most enduring changes rarely announce themselves that way. They arrive softly, almost invisibly, and they stay. That is their power. Think of dawn. The night does not explode into day. The dark sky lightens gradually, and before you even notice, the world is bathed in color. There is no single moment you can point to and say, "Now it happened." It just becomes. And life is like that too. One morning, the shadows no longer define you. One morning, the heaviness no longer clings. One morning, you realize you are free. And here's the beautiful paradox: the mind may doubt the quiet, but the heart recognizes it deep within. You know when something has shifted. You feel it not as excitement, but as a steady hum of coherence, a grounded presence that does not need validation. That steadiness is the evidence. That ease is the miracle. So what do you do when transformation arrives without fanfare? You live it. You let the new normal become home. You stop questioning whether it is real just because it isn't loud. You stop waiting for lightning and begin honoring the gentle glow of sunrise. Living fully in this new normal means giving yourself permission to embody it without second guessing. If peace feels natural now, do not reach back for struggle just to prove you've grown. If old triggers have lost their grip, do not search for new ones to test your strength. Let the quiet be enough. Let the simplicity be the sign. I have learned that the truest proof of change is not how intensely you feel it in the moment, but how naturally you carry it in the days after. When you no longer need to remind yourself to respond differently, when kindness flows without effort, when calm is no longer a practice but a posture, that is when you know transformation has taken root. The quietness of true change is not a flaw, it is its gift, because what slips in silently cannot easily be shaken. What becomes ordinary has the power to last. Fireworks fade, parades disperse, but the sunrise returns every day. Steady and faithful, that is the nature of genuine transformation. So if you find yourself asking, "Is this all?" take a deep breath and consider maybe the miracle is already here, woven into the simplicity of your life. Maybe the absence of drama is not a lack, but the presence of peace. Maybe the extraordinary gift of this moment is that it feels ordinary at all. And if you can learn to trust the quiet, to honor the dawn without demanding fireworks, you will discover a freedom that no spectacle could ever match. You will discover that the real transformation was never about the drama. It was about becoming the kind of person for whom peace is enough. 5. The sacred pause. Where the brain rewires itself, silence has a way of unnerving us. We live in a world that worships movement, noise, and progress. And so when life places us in a pause, the first instinct is to panic. We think we've lost our direction, that something has gone wrong. But what if silence is not emptiness? What if silence is the most fertile ground of all? There is a sacred quality to the pause, a richness that the surface mind cannot see. It's like the hush that falls across a concert hall just before the conductor lifts the baton. That silence is not wasted time. It is not absence. It is anticipation, a living presence, the invisible architecture upon which the music is about to be built. Or picture the archer, drawing the bowstring back. To the untrained eye, it looks like delay, hesitation. But to the archer, that tension is not hesitation. It is power gathering, preparing to release the arrow further than force alone could ever carry it. Life works the same way. The sacred pause is not punishment. It is preparation. In those seasons where nothing seems to move, when doors stay shut and answers are scarce, something profound is happening beneath the surface. Neuroscience tells us that the brain does its deepest rewiring not in moments of activity, but in moments of rest, just as a muscle strengthens not during the workout, but in the recovery afterward. The nervous system integrates change in the stillness. Synapses form new connections. Old pathways weaken. New ones are established. Without the pause, there is no integration. Without silence, there is no song. I remember a time in my life when silence felt unbearable. I had stepped away from familiar patterns, but the new had not yet appeared. I would wake in the morning with a pit in my stomach, desperate for clarity, for movement, for anything that told me I was on the right track. But every attempt to push forward fell flat. It was only when I surrendered, when I allowed myself to sit in the not knowing, that something began to shift. Slowly, the fear eased. Slowly, my body began to relax. And in that relaxation, my mind found space to rewire. What had felt like a void revealed itself as a womb, holding the beginnings of a new life that needed quiet in order to take shape. This is the paradox of the sacred pause. It feels empty, but it is full. It feels silent, but it is alive with information. The stillness is saturated with intelligence, far beyond what the rational mind can comprehend. And the only way to access that intelligence is through surrender. So when you find yourself in such a pause, let yourself breathe. Allow yourself to not know. That phrase, "I don't know," can be one of the most liberating mantras you will ever hold, because it makes space for something greater to arrive. The mind thinks it must have all the answers, but the pause invites you to trust that the answers are already forming beneath the surface, in the deeper layers of your being. This is not easy work. It requires courage to sit with the discomfort of stillness, to resist the urge to fill the silence with frantic activity. But every time you choose to rest in the pause, you are teaching your nervous system to stabilize at a new baseline. You are practicing coherence. You are anchoring the frequency of the life you've been calling in. Think of it this way: when a caterpillar dissolves in the chrysalis, there is a phase where it is neither caterpillar nor butterfly. To outside eyes, it looks like nothing is happening. But inside, every cell is reorganizing. The sacred pause in your own life is that chrysalis. It is the place where the old you dissolves and the new you quietly takes form. So, if you feel suspended, displaced, or uncertain, Do not rush to label it as failure. Do not rush to fix what is not broken. Instead, honor the pause. Treat it as a sacred chamber, a temple of transformation, where silence itself is the teacher. Close your eyes, breathe into the space, and whisper to yourself, "This is not nothing. This is everything being rewired." And one morning, just like that, you will step out of the pause and realize that something inside you has changed. You will find yourself responding differently, standing taller, softer, freer, and the world around you will reflect that change without you needing to force it, because the pause was never empty. It was the moment the arrow was drawn back, so it could fly further than you ever dreamed. 6. The final test, demonstrating frequency instead of arguing. There comes a point on the journey of transformation when life seems to circle back on itself. Old scenarios reappear. The same person who once triggered your deepest wounds shows up again. The same financial struggle you thought you left behind resurfaces. Or the same fear you believed you had conquered whispers at your door. It is tempting in those moments to think, why is this happening again? Haven't I already dealt with this? And the mind, in its impatience, may convince you that you are failing, but the truth is softer and far more empowering. This is not punishment. This is rehearsal. These returning patterns are not evidence that you are stuck. They are opportunities to demonstrate your new frequency. They are the flight simulations of the soul, designed not to break you, but to help you practice flying with the wings you've grown. Think about it. A pilot doesn't take to the skies without hours of practice in a simulator. The simulator repeats stressful scenarios, storms, engine failures, turbulence, not because the pilot is being punished, but because every successful response builds confidence. Each run-through imprints the body with new reflexes. In the same way, life gives you another chance to meet the old challenge with the energy of your new self. Every time you choose openness instead of contraction, abundance instead of scarcity, compassion instead of resentment, you lock yourself more firmly into the new timeline. I remember a season when I was convinced I had finally healed an old wound around money. I felt abundant, trusting, free. Then, out of nowhere, an unexpected bill arrived that seemed to threaten my stability. The panic rose in my chest just as it always had. But this time, instead of spiraling into fear, I paused, I breathed, I whispered to myself, I am not the person I used to be. And in that moment of choosing, something shifted. The bill didn't magically disappear, but my response did. I approached it calmly, with clarity, and what once would have undone me became simply another situation to walk through. That choice, simple as it seemed, was my exam. And by choosing differently, I passed. Not because I proved anything to the world, but because I proved it to myself. That is the heart of the final test. It is not about debate or argument. You don't have to justify to anyone that you've changed. You don't need to fight to convince the past that you are free. The test is lived in your choices, in the quiet steadiness of your presence. You demonstrate your frequency by embodying it, not by defending it. When the old shows up, it is asking a simple question. Who are you now? Your response, not your explanation, not your story, but your lived response, writes the answer. Sometimes this means walking away from the familiar without bitterness. Sometimes it means sitting with the discomfort of fear without letting it dictate your actions. Sometimes it means saying no where you used to say yes, or yes where you used to retreat into no. Each time you respond from the space of your new resonance, you deepen its roots within you. It is important to hold compassion here. 2. You may not ace every test. There may be moments when you slip back into old patterns, and that's all right. Growth is not measured by perfection, but by direction. Even in those moments, The awareness that you've slipped is itself evidence of change. Once you've seen the higher path, you cannot unsee it, and life will offer you another opportunity to step onto it. The gift of these final tests is that they reveal the stability of your transformation. Anyone can feel enlightened when nothing is pressing against them, but true integration shows itself when pressure returns. Do you crumble back into fear? Or do you stand in the coherence of who you've become? Each demonstration strengthens the foundation of your new reality. Until one day, you realize the old triggers have no power at all. And perhaps the most profound part is this: when you no longer need to argue with the past, when you no longer feel the urge to prove anything, you know you have graduated. Silence becomes your testament. Peace becomes your proof. You are no longer trying to convince the old version of yourself or anyone else that you've changed. You are simply living it. So when an old pattern reappears, don't panic. See it as a teacher returning one last time, asking if you're ready to move on. Meet it with grace. Meet it with steadiness. And remember that every choice is a vote for the reality you wish to inhabit. Each act of alignment is another step into the life that is waiting for you. The final test is not about arguing your growth. It is about embodying it. And when you embody it, nothing more needs to be said. 7. Letting go of the old shedding density. Not betrayal. There are things in life that will slip away without ceremony. No loud farewell. No dramatic closure. One day, you simply realize that what once felt heavy in your hands has dissolved, and you no longer feel compelled to hold it. This is not betrayal. This is not abandonment. This is the natural shedding of density that cannot journey with you into the new reality you are choosing. The mind often struggles with this. It wants endings to be clear, stories to be wrapped in neat conclusions. It fears that if something leaves quietly, it must mean we failed to honor it, or that we are turning our back on what once mattered. But life does not always close its chapters with punctuation marks. Sometimes it closes them with a soft turning of the page, and that is enough. I have learned that the things we outgrow often fall away on their own. Like autumn leaves releasing from a branch, the tree does not resist. It does not apologize. It does not tape the leaves back on. It trusts the rhythm. It knows that letting go is not death, but preparation for new life. In the same way, when relationships, habits, or identities begin to dissolve, it is not our job to patch them back together. To stitch together what is unraveling is to resist the natural rhythm of becoming. This does not mean that what you are releasing was meaningless. The leaves fed the tree through many seasons. They served their purpose beautifully, but once their purpose is complete, holding on to them only suffocates the new growth that is waiting. So when life asks you to release, do not think of it as betrayal. Think of it as reverence. Reverence for what was and reverence for what is still to come. There were times in my life when I clung desperately to the old, convinced that letting go would mean dishonoring my past. I tried to keep friendships alive long after they had run their course. Tried to keep working in places that had already drained me dry. But the harder I held, the heavier it became. It was as if I was carrying stones in my pockets while trying to cross a river. The stones were not bad. They had once built my foundation. But to keep moving forward, I had to let them sink. And here is the question that always brings clarity. If I were already living fully in my new reality, what would I still need to hold on to? More often than not, the answer is simple: very little. We cling not because we need something, but because we want to prove something to ourselves, to others, to the version of us that still fears change. But proof is not required. Alignment is. This is why letting go can feel both heartbreaking and liberating. It is not a rejection of the past, but an honoring of the truth that not everything is meant to continue with us. Density is not wrong. It is simply too heavy for the flight we are preparing to take. You cannot soar while dragging what is meant to stay on the ground. The process of letting go rarely looks glamorous. Sometimes it feels like sitting in silence while someone you love drifts away. Sometimes it looks like cleaning out a closet, feeling the weight of old clothes that no longer fit the person you have become. Sometimes it looks like waking up one morning and realizing that the story you've been telling yourself about who you are no longer resonates. These moments may not come with applause or recognition. They are quiet, personal, sacred, and yet they are the very moments that free you. With each release, your energy lightens. With each shedding, your steps become surer. You begin to realize that your worth was never tied to what you could hold together. Your worth lies in your willingness to align with what is true, here and now. If something is leaving your life, let it go with gratitude. Say thank you for the season it gave you, for the lessons it carried, for the ways it shaped you, and then open your hands, because only open hands can receive what is next. Do not mistake resistance for loyalty. True loyalty to yourself is allowing your life to move with the current of growth. True integrity is choosing resonance over familiarity. You are not betraying the past by letting it go. You are honoring the truth that life itself is movement. So when you feel something unravel, resist the urge to patch it back together. Instead, take a deep breath and ask yourself, if I were already standing in the life I am creating, what would I still need to hold on to? Let the answer guide you, and trust that by shedding the weight of what no longer belongs, you are not losing yourself. You are saving yourself, because letting go is not the end. It is the clearing of space, and in that space, something lighter, truer, and more aligned is waiting to arrive. 8. The dissolution of old structures. When energetic architectures expire, there comes a moment in life when the scaffolding that once held you steady begins to crumble. Beliefs that once gave you certainty feel brittle. Identities that once defined you feel too narrow, too small. Invisible agreements you made with yourself or with the world. Agreements about how much you are allowed to want, how much you are allowed to give, who you are allowed to be, suddenly feel like contracts written in a language you no longer speak. It can be disorienting, even frightening, when the very architecture that once gave shape to your days begins to dissolve. But here is the quiet truth. The expiration of old structures is not a failure. It is a sign that their purpose has been fulfilled. Every belief, every identity, every invisible contract served you once. They were stepping stones across the river. They helped you build stability, find belonging, or make sense of the world. But stepping stones are not meant to be permanent homes. Once you've crossed to the other side, clinging to them only keeps you stranded between worlds. The feeling that follows is often emptiness. A strange hollow opens up inside, and the mind panics. Something is wrong. I need to fill this. I need to fix this. But emptiness is not always absence. Sometimes emptiness is invitation. Sometimes emptiness is the sacred clearing where the new foundation is meant to be laid. Think of a home renovation. The old walls must be torn down before the new design can rise. For a time, the space looks chaotic, stripped, exposed. Dust hangs in the air. But the emptiness is not meaningless. It is preparation. Without demolition, there is no rebuilding. Without clearing, there is no creation. The same is true within us. When an old belief collapses, it leaves behind space. When an identity dissolves, it creates room for something truer to take its place. The hollow you feel is not a void to be feared, but a womb for the life that is coming. And yet, most of us rush to fill it. We pile it with busyness, with distractions, with new goals or identities that only mimic the old, anything to avoid the discomfort of spaciousness. But in doing so, we interrupt the very process meant to free us. I know this because I've done it myself. There were seasons when an old role fell away. And instead of honoring the pause, I grasped at the first replacement I could find. I filled the gap with noise, with work, with people who didn't fit, simply because I couldn't bear the silence. But those choices always crumbled too, because they were not built from alignment. They were built from fear. It was only when I allowed the emptiness to stay empty that the new architecture could reveal itself. This is the challenge: to let the hollow remain, to resist the urge to cover it over, to trust that emptiness is not proof of lack, but proof of possibility. The emptiness is where new wiring takes place. Neurons forming new pathways, energy creating new alignments, consciousness expanding into shapes you've never lived before. The silence is the space where the blueprint of the next chapter is being drawn. It takes courage to allow space. It takes faith to sit in the rubble of old structures and not rush to build again. But if you can, you will find that the space itself is intelligent. It knows what it is doing. It is not random. It is not meaningless. It is purposeful. So when you feel beliefs slipping through your fingers, when the identities that once anchored you dissolve, when the old invisible contracts no longer bind, remember this: their expiration is grace. They are not being stolen from you. They are being released because they have served their time. Instead of asking, "What can I fill this with?" try asking, "What is this space making room for?" Instead of scrambling to replace the old, try resting in the open air, letting the dust settle, letting the silence speak. Because just as nature abhors a vacuum, life does not leave emptiness untouched. For long, new structures will emerge, truer, lighter, more aligned. And when they do, you will see that the hollow you once feared was never a void. It was a cradle. It was a place where your becoming could unfold, free of the constraints that once held you. So let the old dissolve. Let the architecture of the past collapse with dignity. Stand in the open space without rushing to cover it. Because this emptiness is not loss. It is the first breath of creation. 9. The art of surrender and embodiment. One moment of resonance outweighs weeks of effort. There is a rhythm to life that we often overlook because we've been taught to chase, to push, to prove. We measure our worth in hours worked, in effort spent, in the sweat we can point to as evidence that we've earned our place. And yet, if you've walked this path long enough, you know there comes a point where effort alone begins to feel heavy. The harder you push, the more resistant the world seems to become. It is as though you are rowing upstream, fighting the current, exhausting yourself just to stay in place. But the quantum field does not respond to effort in the way we've been taught to believe. It doesn't measure the hours you've logged, nor the strain you've endured. What it responds to is resonance, pure alignment between thought, feeling, and action. A single moment of clarity, a single act of coherence where your body, your heart, and your mind are all singing the same note, carries more power than weeks of half-hearted struggle. This is the art of surrender and embodiment. To surrender is not to give up. It is to release the frantic need to control, to prove, to manipulate outcomes. To embody is to live as though the reality you are calling in is already here. It is to let your words reflect the freedom you desire, to let your choices mirror the abundance you seek, to let the way you treat your body honor the vitality you claim. In that space, you are no longer begging the field to deliver. You are demonstrating that you are already resonant with it. I remember a time when I was working endlessly toward a goal, believing that more effort would finally break something open. I wore my exhaustion like a badge, thinking it proved my commitment. But nothing moved, nothing shifted. It wasn't until one quiet evening, when I simply stopped striving, stopped doing, stopped calculating, that something within me clicked. I felt a calm certainty settle in my chest, as if the outcome I had been chasing was already mine. That moment, fleeting as it was, brought more progress than all the weeks of labor that came before. Not because I did more, but because I finally aligned. Resonance is not about force. It is about clarity. It's like tuning a guitar. You can play the strings with all your might, but if they are out of tune, the sound will be discordant no matter how hard you strum. But if you take a moment to tune the string precisely, the lightest touch produces beauty. The same is true in life. One crystalline moment of coherence makes the whole field respond. The practice, then, is not to work harder, but to return again and again to alignment. To pause in the middle of doubt and breathe until your body softens. To notice when your words are born of fear and choose instead to speak from trust. To care for your body as if it were already living in the future you desire. These are not grand gestures. They are quiet acts of congruence. And yet, they ripple through the field more powerfully than all the frantic striving in the world. This is not to say that action does not matter. Action is essential. But action without alignment is just noise. Action born from coherence, however, is symphony. It is movement that flows with the current rather than against it. It is rowing with the river, allowing the water to carry you further with less strain. There is a humility in surrender. It asks you to admit that your mind alone cannot orchestrate the whole symphony of your life. It asks you to trust that the field is intelligent, that it knows how to arrange the details once you've set the resonance. And there is courage in embodiment. It asks you to live today as if the life you long for is not in the distance, but in your very breath, in your very step. The next time you feel yourself pushing and straining, pause it. Place your hand on your heart. Ask yourself, am I aligned right now? Or am I trying to compensate for misalignment with effort? If the answer is misalignment, breathe. Find the thread of resonance. Choose one small action that feels like truth, not performance. It could be as simple as drinking a glass of water with reverence, as simple as speaking one kind word to yourself, as simple as letting your shoulders drop. That one moment of coherence, that one crystal clear note, can do more than 100 hours of noise, because the field does not reward exhaustion, it responds to presence. And when you are fully present, fully embodied, fully aligned, you will discover that life moves with you instead of against you. You will find that the current carries you further than you ever thought possible. Not because you pushed harder, but because you finally let yourself flow. So remember, surrender is not weakness. Embodiment is not pretense. They are the twin practices of living in resonance. And one moment of true resonance outweighs weeks of desperate effort. The art is not in doing more, but in becoming the one who already is. Choosing the new timeline. Do not waste your strength trying to patch the boat that is already dissolving beneath you. Not when the other shore is already visible. The instinct to repair, to cling, to salvage what is sinking is only the voice of fear that believes you will be left with nothing. But look closer. The boat is not failing you. It is releasing you. It is letting you step fully onto the current that will carry you where you are meant to go. There is a wisdom in standing still for a moment. Even as the familiar breaks apart, this pause is not weakness. It is not delay. It is a sacred pause, rich with information. In the stillness, you begin to see the subtle signals, the repeating signs, the synchronicities, the small invitations that guide you toward your next reality. And when life presents you with familiar tests, familiar storms, it is not to punish you but to ask, can you embody the new frequency you've chosen? Can you live as the one who has already arrived, the leap you long for? The quantum shift into a new life does not wait for conditions to be perfect. It does not wait for the world to line up neatly before it moves. It waits for you. Your coherence, your alignment, your willingness to embody what you know to be true. The field responds not to desperation, not to effort alone, but to the resonance of your being. That is why even the smallest act, When chosen with alignment, carries enormous power. You do not need to overturn your whole life in one dramatic gesture. The path is built through quiet, simple actions that anchor you into the vibration you are choosing. Write down a promise to yourself and mean it. Clear out a drawer or a corner of your home and let the space breathe with you. Speak one honest word where before you might have hidden the truth. Release one burden you've been carrying out of habit, one obligation that no longer serves. These are not small things. They are seeds. And when planted in coherence, they shift the entire field around you. Then breathe. Breathe as if the air itself is saying yes to you. With each exhale, release the fragments of the old life. With each inhale, receive the energy of the new. And as you stand in that breath, whisper gently to yourself, not as a command, but as a soft declaration of truth. I choose the new timeline. Do not underestimate the power of this. Choice is not just a mental decision. It is an energetic declaration. Every cell in your body listens when you speak with sincerity. Every part of creation takes note when you align with your words. The universe is not testing you to see if you are worthy. It is simply waiting for you to match the frequency of the life that is already reaching toward you. And once you do, the rest begins to arrange itself. Circumstances shift, people appear, opportunities align, not because you forced them, but because you resonated with them. What once felt like chasing now feels like unfolding. What once felt like struggle now feels like flow. I say this not as theory, but as someone who has lived through the dismantling of old boats and the trembling of empty hands. I know how terrifying it feels to stand between worlds, to watch the familiar dissolve without yet seeing the full shape of what is coming. But I also know this: the other shore always reveals itself, and when you arrive, you realize that the collapse was never meant to destroy you. It was meant to deliver you. So if you are in that place right now, if the old is falling away and the new feels uncertain, trust the pause, trust the signals, trust the quiet choices that align you with who you know you are becoming. The leap is already happening. Your only task is to live as though it has. And when doubt returns, as it always does, return to the simplest of truths, breathe, and choose again. Whisper it once more. Softly but surely, I choose the new timeline. From that moment forward, the rest will take care of itself.